Okay, the other day we left off with the dinam of Bracha Achareino, the after Bracha. Now we learned that in order to make an after Bracha, you need to have a size of a kazayas, which again is approximately 1 ounce. For liquids, it's machlekes and halacha, how much liquid do you need to drink to make an after Bracha? But the Rebbe Paschal, that's the way most people rule, that you need to have a revius. A revius is 3 ounces of liquid. So in other words, if somebody has only 2 ounces of liquid, you do not make an after bracha. You have 3 ounces or more, you make an after bracha. Now, what happens though, there are opinions that hold that if you have an entire fruit, even if it's smaller than a kazayas, you still make an after bracha on it. In other words, according to certain opinions, if you have, the Alter Rebbe brings those opinions down also. If you have, let's say, a grape. Now, grape itself is not a kazayas. It's not 1 ounce. But because it's an entire grape, or a date, or a fig, or according to certain opinions, a nut, I mean, if you have a whole thing, so then some opinions say, and that itself, because it's complete, it's prominent, it's choshev enough that would demand a bracha acharena. A raisin, yeah, the same thing. According to that opinion, 1 raisin would. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe says you should either don't eat a whole one, or if you're eating whole ones, make sure you eat a kazayas to get rid of the. But bottom line, because of the rule that if you're in doubt, you don't make a bracha. So what happens if somebody ate 1 grape? Do they make an after bracha or not? Then it is no, because there's an argument in halacha, so you can't make a bracha. It might be in vain, so therefore you wouldn't make. But Shulchan Aruch says, try not to eat just 1 grape. If you're eating grapes, make sure you eat enough grapes for 1 ounce to make an after bracha. By the way, there's another interesting thing also. If you ever notice, you don't always see it so much here by Ashkenazic or even by Hasidic Jews. You might notice it in other places also. Shabbos afternoon for Kiddush, normally Kiddush, you have a cup, the cup has to hold a revius, 3 ounces of wine or grape juice, whatever. But they'll take a little shot glass of whiskey, and they'll make Kiddush on it. They say, what is the basis of that? Because the chayre, they're not making Kiddush on an entire revius of wine that normally wine would demand. If somebody did that with wine, I mean, they made a bracha, but you're not going to Kiddush because on wine you need a revius. But there are opinions, there's a famous Taz that holds that if you drink a little bit of whiskey, you have to make an after bracha. Why? It's like this whole fruit thing. He said it's so sharp that a little bit is like a revius of normal liquid. So based on that, they told her, great tzaddik, a lot of great Polish tzaddikim would make Kiddush like that Shabbos day. The Alter Rebbe doesn't hold like that, and therefore in Chabad we don't do it. But I'm just saying there's certain exceptions to the rule of making an after bracha, even if it's less than a kazayas or less than a revius.
The dry raisin.
A raisin, by definition, is dry. If it's not dry, it's called a grape.
And 1 whole grape, you should say afterwards.
I just said there's a machlekes. So bottom line, if you did, the Alter Rebbe says you should either make sure not to eat a whole grape, or if you're eating grapes, eat enough to make a bracha acharena. But lepel, if you eat 1 grape, you don't make an after bracha, because it's a machlekes if you can make a bracha like that. Now there's another interesting thing. All foods combine to make a kazayas, but food and drink don't. Let's say, for instance, somebody eats a half an ounce of an apple, and somebody will eat a half an ounce of ice cream. Now you have apple. It's a lousy combination, but I don't know. So you have half a kazayas of an apple, you don't make an after bracha. Half a kazayas of chocolate, let's say, you also don't make an after bracha. But now you ate a half an ounce of chocolate, you ate a half an ounce of apple, both have the same after bracha, So the din is foods combine, even though they're different foods. Foods combine to make a kazayas. So if you have a half an ounce, 1.5 ounces of chocolate and 1.5 ounces of apple, you'd make a berry nefashos. What happens though, if you have a half a kazayas of cake and a half a kazayas of an apple? Now, the normal after bracha on cake is ala michya. The normal after bracha on apple is berry nefashos. But now you ate a half of one thing and a half. It's not the same, like apple and chocolate is the same after bracha. Here you're eating a half a kazayas of cake, half a kazayas of berry nefashos. So what do you do then? So then the halacha is you make a berry nefashos. You make the lesser of the after brachas. In other words, to give you another example, somebody ate a half a kazayas of bread and a half a kazayas of cake. Okay? They didn't eat enough cake. Now cake is after bracha is ala michya. Bread, the after bracha is bracha samazin, benching. But now you had a half a kazayas of cake and a half a kazayas of bread. What after bracha do you make? You make an ala michya. If you had a half a kazayas of cake, of two things that are berry nefashos, then you make an after bracha berry nefashos. What?
How is it that when you eat a suda, you wash, but you don't have kazayas, and you say the pasta becomes a muffin? Was that only if you had kazayas?
What you're quoting a din, which is b'diavad, not l'chatchila for the record, it's a b'diavad din. What happens, you go to, you have to go to, you eat the Shabbos meal. Okay? You make kiddush, you sit down, you have challah, then you have a whole meal. Okay? Now normally in order to bench, you need to eat a kazayas of bread, or challah, or matzah, whatever, but you need to eat a kazayas. Because the after bracha is, and fish and soup and chicken and whatever is not benching. So there is a din in Shulchan Aruch, but it's b'diavad not l'chatchila, that if somebody, let's say, ate not a crumb, they ate, let's say, a half a kazayas of bread, okay, and they ate a ton of other food, and they got full from everything together, so then the bracha would be, then you'd be able to bench. But that's only if it's food that's not like dessert. If somebody, to give you a crazy example, a guy washed, ate a little piece of bread and ate enough chocolate and ice cream that it got full. Okay? Then you don't bench. Because when is food combining to the bread b'diavad? That's when it's food that's made to fill you up. If it's made to fill you up, so then even though you ate a half a kazayas of bread, but nevertheless you got full from everything else, so then the Shulchan Aruch says, but you have to bench. But a person shouldn't do that, they should eat a kazayas. What people also aren't aware of, and we mentioned this many times, when you wash for bread, in order to be able to make, people are totally unaware of this din, and many times it could be a question of bracha levatala. A bracha rishena, okay, is on a crumb, you make a bracha, okay? After bracha, you must have a kazayas. In order, when you wash for bread, which even a crumb of bread you have to wash, but the only time you make, when you wash for bread, the only time you make al netilas yadayim is if you're going to be eating a kibetza of bread, which is double kazayas. In other words, you might wash and eat enough bread to bench, because you had a kazayas of bread, but you still are not going to have enough to be able to have said al netilas yadayim and the washing for bread. So if you know, I'll give you a practical example. Let's say average thing. A slice of rye bread, an average slice of rye bread is a kazayas. Okay? But if you want to wash and bake al netilas yadayim, you have to have 2 pieces of bread. What happens if I know I'm not going to be eating 2 pieces of bread? I'm going to take 1 piece of toast with some peanut butter on it or jelly or cream cheese, whatever. I know I'm going to be eating one piece of bread. So the din is, you wash your bread, but you cannot make al netilas yadayim. So this person that's eating, going to a wedding, or so it happens by weddings also. People go to a wedding, they wash, and then they eat very little challah because there's too much other food to eat, and then they're stuck. What do? They bench. It's not, but al netilas yadayim you can't make ever unless if you're eating 2 ounces of bread. Then you can make al netilas yadayim. What?
If there is a suspect, if you're not certain whether or not you're going to have 2 ounces of bread, you believe you will, but you're not certain. There is a suspect.
So then you wash without the bracha al netilas yadayim. The washing is valid. You just can't make, because there might be a bracha in vain. If you know what you're eating, and again, what happens if somebody thought they were going to eat a sandwich of 2 pieces of bread? Okay, so they made al netilas yadayim. In the middle where they got a stomach ache or whatever, they're not eating it. Garnished. It's not a bracha in vain, because when they washed and they said al netilas yadayim, the intent was to eat 2 pieces, a kibbutz of bread, an egg of bread, which is halachically double of an ounce. So then you'd have to make a bracha. Okay, but drink and food don't combine. That means what happens if somebody eats a half a kazayas of food and a half of a revius? In other words, again, kazayas is 1 ounce. What happens if somebody eats a half an ounce of food and 1.5 ounces of liquid? And they're both buried nefashos. They're both the same after bracha. So by food it wouldn't be a problem. You make half an ounce of apple, half an ounce of chocolate, you make buried nefashos. But food and drink don't combine. That's the halacha. In nothing. Not in treif and kosher, not in fasting on Yom Kippur, not in all that stuff. Food and drink don't combine to make a proper amount. Food and food does, drink and drink does, but then you don't. And I'll give you another example, which is a very interesting thing that happens by a kiddush in shul very often. Not here only, it could happen very often. There's a din that because of the prominence of Beri Pri Hagofen, when you say Beri Pri Hagofen, not Shabbos, during the week, whenever it may be, Shabbos during the week, you make a Beri Pri Hagofen, you don't make any bracha on any other liquids. That Beri Pri Hagofen covers all liquids. Not only does it cover it before, it covers it afterwards. Which means, what happens, I had a cup of wine, okay, and then I had a cup of orange juice. Now it was enough to make both brachas. I have enough to make an ala gefen after the wine. I have enough to make a beri nefashos after the orange juice. But nevertheless, I don't make a bracha, not before, not after, on the wine. I'm sorry. You don't make a bracha before and after on the juice. Providing, and here's a very interesting thing, providing that I drink a revius of wine. Now I'll give you a simple example. You come to shul, somebody makes kiddush. They pour, into your cup. Yeah? You're not drinking a lot of wine. You're not drinking 3 ounces of wine. You're drinking a little bit from kiddush, right? Then you took soda or juice, whatever. Okay? So now you're not going to be making an after bracha on the wine because you didn't drink enough wine to make an after bracha. But you drank enough juice to make an after bracha. So then, even though you did not make a shahakol on the orange juice because the wine covered it, but now afterwards, because you didn't drink enough wine to make an after bracha on the wine, so then you're going to have to make an after bracha on juice. So I'll give you a simple example. A guy made kiddush, heard kiddush from somebody. The guy gave him a little bit of wine to drink. He ate a kazayas of cake, because you need to eat a kazayas cake to be ate a kiddush, okay? And he had a cup of soda. Okay, so the guy had a drop of wine, he had a cup of soda, and a kazayas of cake. So now what does he do? So he doesn't make a shahakol on the soda, because the Beri Pri Hagofen that he heard or said, either one, covers all liquids. So he's not going to be making a shahakol on the soda. But now after eating, he has to make an alamichi on the cake, and he has to make a brain nefashos on the liquid that he drank, because he never made an after. If he would have made an after bracha on the wine because he drank enough wine, so then you don't make a brain nefashos on the soda. But here he didn't, and this is very common, by the way. People go to Kiddush, they take a little wine from the guy making Kiddush, but they drink soda or juice or whatever it may be, they drink other stuff, and they eat cake. So in that case, you have to make a brain nefashos, because you didn't make an alagefen on the juice, on the wine. What?
So if you're saying al-mifta and you have a little wine, you don't add halagefen?
No, it's not enough to add alagefen. It's not enough, a little bit of wine. You don't add alagefen, so you don't do it. Okay. Machad shin is